When the stars tried to silence humanity, Earth answered louder. There is a moment in the deepest part of space where silence is not just the absence of sound, it is a presence, a weight, something ancient and vast that has existed long before the first human ever looked up at the night sky and dared to wonder. The universe is approximately 13.8 billion years old, Earth is 4.5 billion years old, and humanity, in all its complexity, its art, its wars, its love, its grief, humanity has existed for roughly 300,000 years. If you compressed the entire history of the cosmos into a single calendar year, humans would appear only in the final 23 minutes of December 31st. We are, by cosmic standards, an afterthought. And yet, here we are, still talking, still building, still reaching upward. The universe has tried to silence us, not out of malice. The cosmos doesn't know what malice is. It operates on physics, not emotion. But if you look at Earth's history honestly, you begin to see something extraordinary, a pattern of extinction-level challenges that should have ended everything, and a planet, and eventually a species, that refused to go quiet. Let's go back, way back. About 2.4 billion years ago, something happened that nearly annihilated all life on Earth. Scientists call it the Great Oxidation Event. Cyanobacteria, microscopic organisms that had learned to photosynthesize, began producing oxygen as a waste product. For the anaerobic life forms that dominated the planet at the time, oxygen was poison, pure lethal poison. This wasn't a meteor strike or a volcanic explosion. The catastrophe was produced by life itself. One group of living things accidentally created conditions that were lethal to almost everything else. The atmosphere shifted, oceans changed, billions upon billions of organisms died in what might be the single largest extinction in Earth's history. And yet, life persisted. Not the same life, not unchanged, but life. The oxygen that killed so many became the very foundation for something new, complex, multicellular organisms that would eventually, hundreds of millions of years later, walk upright, build cities, and ask questions about where they came from. The stars didn't silence Earth. The planet adopted. It answered. Move forward to 252 million years ago, the Permian Triassic extinction event. Scientists call it the Great Dying, and for good reason. This was the most severe mass extinction in Earth's history. Over 90 to 96% of all marine species disappeared. About 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species vanished. The planet's biodiversity collapsed in geological terms almost instantaneously. What caused it? Massive volcanic activity in what is now Siberia. These eruptions, the Siberian traps, released enormous amounts of carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere over hundreds of thousands of years. Global temperatures spiked, ocean chemistry changed, acid rain fell, oxygen levels in the oceans plummeted. The Earth was, in every meaningful sense, dying. And then something stubborn happened. Small, reptile-like creatures that survived in isolated pockets began to spread. Slowly, painfully slowly. Over millions of years, the world rebuilt itself. New ecosystems formed. Eventually, the descendants of those survivors would become the dinosaurs. And then, after another catastrophe 66 million years ago, a 6-mile-wide asteroid striking the Yucatan Peninsula, the small, warm-blooded, furry things hiding in the shadows would inherit what remained. Those small things were our ancestors. We exist because the universe threw its worst at this planet, repeatedly, and life found a way through every single time. Not gracefully, not without devastation, but through. Now consider the human story specifically. Our species, Homo sapiens, evolved in Africa approximately 300,000 years ago. But genetic evidence suggests that around 70,000 years ago, something nearly finished us completely. The Toba catastrophe theory proposes that a supervolcanic eruption in what is now Indonesia created a volcanic winter that lasted years, perhaps decades. Global temperatures dropped, food sources vanished. The human population may have been reduced to somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000 individuals. Think about what that means. Every human being alive today, all 8 billion of us, may be descended from a tiny group of survivors huddled together in the cold and the dark, unsure if tomorrow would come. We almost didn't make it. And here's the thing that strikes me most about that moment. Those ancestors of ours didn't have science to explain what was happening. They didn't have meteorology or volcanology, or the comfort of knowing that the ash clouds would eventually clear. They just had each other. They had fire, they had whatever instinct drives living things to persist, even when persistence seems irrational. They kept going. And 70,000 years later, their descendants built the Hubble Space Telescope and pointed it at a seemingly empty patch of sky, a patch the size of a grain of sand held at arm's length, and discovered that within that tiny space, there were approximately 3,000 galaxies, each containing hundreds of billions of stars. From near extinction to peering into the infinite, that is the human arc. But the universe didn't stop testing us after Toba. Plagues have swept through human civilizations with terrifying regularity. The bubonic plague, or Black Death, killed somewhere between 30 and 60% of Europe's population in the 14th century. Entire villages were wiped out. The social fabric of medieval society was torn apart. People buried their own families, priests fled their congregations. The institutions that gave human life structure and meaning seemed to be collapsing. And yet, from that devastation emerged something unexpected. Labor became more valuable because there were fewer workers. Surviving peasants gained economic leverage they had never possessed before. The old feudal hierarchies began to crack. Some historians argue that the Black Death was one of the catalysts that eventually led to the Renaissance, a flowering of human art, science, and thought that transformed the Western world. Suffering on an unimaginable scale, and from it, unexpected renewal. The stars tried to silence humanity, and humanity painted the Sistine Chapel. There's a concept in biology called resilience. It's the ability of a system to absorb disturbance and reorganize while undergoing change, so as to essentially retain the same function, structure, and identity. Resilient systems are not rigid. They bend, they transform. They are not the same after the disturbance as they were before, but they persist. Earth itself is the ultimate resilient system, and humanity, for all our flaws, and we have enormous flaws, has inherited that resilience in remarkable ways. Look at the 20th century alone. 2 world wars, the Holocaust, the atomic bomb, the Cold War with its ever-present threat of nuclear annihilation, multiple genocides, a flu pandemic in 1918 that killed somewhere between 50 and 100 million people, more than the First World War it accompanied. By any rational measure, the 20th century should have broken humanity. It very nearly did. And yet, by the century's end, more human beings were living in democracy than ever before in history. Extreme poverty, while still devastating, had fallen dramatically. Vaccines had eradicated smallpox and pushed polio to the edge of extinction. Life expectancy had nearly doubled. The internet connected human minds across every continent. This is not a naive story of progress. Progress is not linear. It is not guaranteed. There are reversals and catastrophes still ahead of us that we cannot fully predict. But the pattern that emerges when you look at the long arc of human history is undeniable. We have been knocked down repeatedly and brutally, and we have gotten up. Not because the universe wants us to. The universe is indifferent to our survival. We get up because something in the architecture of living things, something in the stubbornness of matter itself when it is organized in the right way, refuses to accept silence as the final answer. Consider what it actually takes for a civilization to persist through catastrophe. It takes memory, the ability to record what happened, to learn from it, to pass knowledge across generations. Every book ever written is an act of defiance against oblivion. Every teacher who stands in front of a classroom is keeping the continuity of human understanding alive. The ancient Sumerians pressed cuneiform into clay tablets, not because they thought someone 4,000 years later would read their records of grain transactions, but those tablets survived, and they gave us a window into a world that seemed lost forever. It takes cooperation. The Toba survivors didn't make it through alone. No individual human has ever survived in genuine isolation for long. Our species is wired for connection. We share information, we distribute labor, we take care of the sick and the young in ways that are almost unique in the animal kingdom. Our vulnerability as individuals is the very thing that makes us powerful as a collective. A single human in the wilderness is fragile. 1 million humans working toward a shared goal is a force that can reshape the planet. It takes imagination, the ability to look at the world as it is and envision something that does not yet exist. Every technological innovation in human history began as an idea that wasn't yet real. Fire didn't exist for our ancestors as a tool until someone imagined using it as one. Agriculture wasn't inevitable. Someone had to imagine that you could take a wild grass and over generations shape it into something that could feed thousands. The vaccines that have saved hundreds of millions of lives existed first as a hypothesis, a question, a dream that the invisible machinery of disease could be outwitted. Memory, cooperation, imagination. These are Earth's answers to the silence of the stars. There is something I find endlessly compelling about the fact that humans, the moment they had sufficient technology, immediately pointed it at the sky. The Voyager 1 spacecraft was launched in 1977. It carried a golden record, a disk containing sounds and images from Earth. Music, greetings in 55 languages, the sound of rain and surf, the cry of a baby, a mother's first words to a child, mathematical diagrams that might explain our location in the galaxy to whatever intelligence might one day find it. Voyager 1 is now the most distant human-made object in existence. It has traveled more than 23 billion kilometers from Earth. It has crossed into interstellar space, the vast emptiness between star systems, and it is still transmitting, still sending signals back to Earth 47 years after launch. That golden record floating through interstellar space is, to me, one of the most profound things our species has ever done. Not because it's likely to be found, the odds against that are astronomical, but because we made it anyway. Because a species that almost didn't survive a supervolcano 70,000 years ago decided when it had the chance to send its music into the void. Not a weapon, not a warning. Music. But I want to be careful here, because this is not simply a story of triumph. The same species that created Voyager also created the systems that are now warming the planet at a rate that threatens mass extinction. The cooperation that makes us powerful can calcify into tribalism and conflict. The imagination that drives innovation can be turned toward destruction just as easily as toward healing. The universe's indifference cuts both ways. It gives us no guarantees. The same cosmic silence that we have defied for billions of years could still eventually consume us. We are not immune to the forces that ended the dinosaurs, or collapsed the Roman Empire, or silenced countless civilizations whose names we will never know. What we have is not invincibility. What we have is possibility. And possibility is only meaningful if we choose to use it. Is what the long view of Earth's history actually tells us. Every catastrophe that has struck this planet, from the Great Oxidation Event to the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs, to the Black Death, to the World Wars, has been followed not by silence, but by transformation. The world that emerged on the other side was different. Often for a very long time it was worse, but it was not silent. Life, once it gets a foothold, is extraordinarily hard to eliminate. Not because it is powerful in the way we usually think of power, strength, armor, dominance, but because it is adaptive, because it finds the cracks in every catastrophe and grows through them, because the very instability that creates disasters also creates opportunities for new forms to emerge. We are living proof of this. You, right now watching this, are the product of 4.5 billion years of this process. Every single one of your ancestors, stretching back to the first self-replicating molecule in some ancient ocean, survived. Not all of them thrived. Many of them suffered in ways we can barely imagine, but they survived long enough to pass something forward. That is your inheritance, not a guarantee, not safety, but the stubbornness of life itself, encoded in every cell of your body, whispering, keep going. The stars didn't silence humanity, not at Toba, not during the Black Death, not during the 20th century's cascade of horrors. And the challenges ahead, climate change, artificial intelligence, the next pandemic we haven't yet imagined, these are real and they are serious, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. But so is pretending that we don't have something extraordinary to work with. We have a planet that has been surviving existential crises for 4.5 billion years. We have a species that has been surviving its own near extinctions for 300,000 years. We have the accumulated knowledge of every human who has ever lived and written something down. We have the capacity to look at a crisis, understand it, communicate about it, and organize responses that no other species on Earth can even approximate. And we have, somewhere in the part of us that is older than language, the same refusal that kept 3,000 frightened humans alive in the shadow of Toba, the refusal to accept that this is the end. There is a quote that has been attributed to Carl Sagan, who spent his life translating the enormity of the cosmos into language that humans could feel as well as understand. He wrote about the pale blue dot, the photograph taken by Voyager 1 from 6 billion kilometers away, in which Earth appears as a tiny point of light, barely visible against the backdrop of space. He described what that image says about our place in the universe, about how every king and peasant, every saint and sinner in the history of our species has lived out their lives on that mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam, about our responsibility to one another, given that we are all we have. That photograph, that dot, is every catastrophe that ever struck Earth, and every recovery, every extinction and every emergence, every war and every renaissance, every moment of cruelty and every moment of grace. All of it happened on that single pale dot, surrounded by the vastness of cosmic silence. And the dot is still there, still warm, still turning, still full of people who wake up every morning and in ways large and small answer the silence with noise. With music, with questions, with children, with art, with science, with the simple act of being alive on a Tuesday, when everything in the universe is arranged to make life improbable, and life happens anyway. The stars tried to silence humanity. Earth answered louder. And so, in whatever way you can manage today, should you?